It was a bright and hopeful day in the year 2137 when the unthinkable happened. Humanity had spent decades in the vast expanse of space, forging alliances with alien species, trading knowledge, and working together to create a future for the galaxy. Earth was no longer the only home for humans. They had spread across countless worlds, building relationships with races that were once unimaginable. Humanity had become a respected member of the Coalition of Unity, a powerful intergalactic alliance that brought together peaceful and diverse civilizations. For years, humans had lived in harmony with their alien allies, offering assistance when needed, and always showing kindness and understanding. But everything changed with a sudden and brutal attack that none could have predicted. The Encore, a gentle race known for their intelligence and wisdom, were one of humanity's closest allies. Their homeworld was a sanctuary of knowledge, filled with universities, libraries, and research centers where species from all over the galaxy could come to learn. The Encore had always been a peaceful people, never involved in conflict unless it was absolutely necessary. They valued intellect and empathy, traits that had made them some of humanity's most trusted friends. But one fateful night, without warning, everything was torn apart. The Encore's world was bombarded by the Zorkians, a brutal and cold-hearted species known for their war-driven culture. Their attack was swift and merciless, wiping out entire cities and reducing the once thriving planet to a desolate wasteland. News of the attack spread quickly, but it was not the destruction itself that sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. It was the nature of the Zorkian assault. This was no simple raid. It was an act of complete annihilation. The Zorkians had attacked without provocation, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. The Encore, defenseless in their peaceful way of life, were not prepared to fight back. The destruction of their planet was swift and without mercy. Within hours, the Encore were scattered across the galaxy, their once great civilization reduced to refugees. The Galactic Council, composed of representatives from every major species in the Coalition of Unity, was thrown into chaos. Diplomats argued endlessly, unsure of how to respond to such a terrifying and violent act. Some factions, particularly those with military power, argued that it was time to retaliate, but others warned against rushing into war. The Zorkians were unpredictable, and no one knew what kind of devastation they could unleash if provoked. But there was one faction that did not hesitate. Humanity had long prided itself on being a force for peace, yet it had always maintained a certain resilience. Earth had survived its own wars, struggles, and moments of darkness. Humanity knew what it was like to be pushed to the edge, and the destruction of the Encore homeworld was an unspoken challenge, one that humanity could not ignore. It was during an emergency session of the Galactic Council, just hours after the news had broken, that a decision was made. "We will not stand by and let this happen," General Evelyn Stryker said, her voice calm but firm. She was a military leader who had gained the respect of both humans and their alien allies. "The Zorkians have crossed a line, and we will make sure they know what happens when you attack one of our own. We will not sit idly by and watch as peace is destroyed." Her words echoed in the chamber, and the room fell silent. Some species had doubts, but humanity had long been known for its resilience, its capacity to fight when others backed down. In the face of such aggression, General Stryker and humanity's leaders understood what was required. The Galactic Council, despite its reservations, agreed to issue a single message to the galaxy: harm our alien allies and face the consequences. The message was clear, but the galaxy's reaction was far from what humanity expected. While many saw it as a strong stance, others laughed at the notion. They believed that humanity, despite its rising power, was still a relatively young and untested species. How could humans, so accustomed to diplomacy and peace, truly stand up against a race like the Zorkians? And even if they did, who could be certain that humanity could follow through? In the days that followed, the galaxy buzzed with whispers, doubts, and mockery. It was hard for anyone to believe that humanity, who had always been known for its kindness, could truly turn the tide in a galactic conflict. As the first days passed, the Coalition began to focus on rebuilding and relocating the surviving Encore. But deep within the human ranks, something stirred. General Stryker knew that there was more at play here than simple retaliation. This was about setting a precedent. The universe needed to understand that there were consequences for harming those who were under the protection of humanity and its allies. In a secret meeting, General Stryker met with top military officers and scientists. They began to form a plan, a strategy that would make the galaxy take humanity's warnings seriously. They would not only retaliate, they would demonstrate their full strength in a way that no one could ignore. The galaxy needed to see what humanity was truly capable of. Within days, humanity's most advanced ships, weaponry, and combat technologies were prepared for deployment. In a coordinated strike, humanity launched a series of military actions against Zorkian military outposts and supply lines. The attacks were precise, calculated, and devastating. Each operation showed the immense power that humanity could wield when pushed to the brink. And yet, it wasn't just the firepower that made the galaxy take notice. It was the methodical way in which humanity executed these strikes, their unrelenting determination, and their strategy. They had made a statement. The response was immediate. The Zorkians, caught off guard by humanity's swift retaliation, found themselves scrambling to defend their territories. The galaxy watched in awe as humanity displayed a level of tactical brilliance and power that none had expected. It wasn't just about winning battles, it was about showing the universe that humanity would not tolerate the destruction of those they cared for. Every victory, no matter how small, sent a clear message: if you harm our allies, we will come for you. There will be no mercy. But despite the initial successes, the galaxy remained skeptical. Many believed this was just the beginning, and that the Zorkians would retaliate with even greater force. There was still uncertainty, still doubt in the air. Could humanity really maintain this level of resolve? Could they back up their words with action when the stakes were higher than ever before? General Stryker understood the challenge ahead. She knew that this would not be an easy path. And in the days to come, the true test would begin. The galaxy was still buzzing with disbelief when humanity made its first true move after issuing its warning. The Zorkians, despite their brutality, hadn't taken humanity's message seriously. They had underestimated the human spirit, assuming that their reputation as peacemakers and diplomats meant they would never engage in true warfare. But they were wrong, and they would soon learn the hard way that humanity's strength was not something to ignore. The first strike came without warning. A small but highly advanced human fleet, led by the warship Vigilant, appeared near a Zorkian mining station on the edge of their territory. The Zorkians had long relied on the resources of this station to fuel their military machine, and it was heavily guarded. But the humans had done their homework. They had studied the Zorkians' weaknesses, their strategies, and their battle tactics. What they did not expect was the precision and effectiveness of the attack. In mere hours, the mining station was reduced to rubble. The Zorkians were stunned. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Vigilant and its sister ships didn't just destroy the station, they disabled all of the Zorkian defensive systems with such skill that the enemy had no chance to retaliate. The humans had launched a lightning-fast assault, leaving no room for the Zorkians to regroup or mount a counterattack. It was as though they had known exactly what the Zorkians would do before they did. As the news spread throughout the galaxy, the shockwaves were felt everywhere. Even those who had doubted humanity's strength were forced to rethink their opinions. But this wasn't just about a single victory, it was about sending a message to the galaxy. The humans had come for what they valued, and they would stop at nothing to protect their allies. The response from the Zorkians was quick but misguided. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, and now they were determined to prove their superiority. They launched a retaliatory strike, targeting a nearby human colony. It was a desperate move, but one that showed just how far the Zorkians were willing to go to maintain their dominance. However, humanity had been waiting for just such a move. General Stryker, aware that the Zorkians would retaliate, had prepared a devastating counterattack. Within days, a combined human fleet and N-Corps forces were ready to launch an operation that would shake the Zorkians to their core. They had learned from their first strike, refining their tactics, and now they were ready to take the next step. The humans didn't just respond, they launched an assault that would cripple the Zorkian war machine. Using the Vigilant and several other ships, the humans infiltrated Zorkian space, executing a series of precise surgical strikes on critical infrastructure. Weapons depots, communication relays, and even military command centers were hit one after another, leaving the Zorkians scrambling to regroup. But the humans weren't finished yet. As the Zorkian military attempted to rally, the N-Core species, once thought too passive to engage in combat, stood alongside humanity. Their advanced technology, once thought to be purely for peaceful purposes, proved to be an invaluable asset. Together, they launched a joint offensive on Zorkian strongholds, pushing them back in a way no one had predicted. The Zorkians, who had once believed they could strike without consequence, found themselves on the defensive. The ripple effect was felt across the galaxy. Many of the lesser factions, who had been watching from the sidelines, began to see humanity in a new light. The Zorkians were powerful, but they were not invincible. And humanity, with its ability to rally allies and strike with precision, was far more dangerous than anyone had realized. Yet even in the midst of these victories, there was no time to celebrate. General Stryker knew that this was just the beginning. The Zorkians were not going to give up so easily, and their retaliation was bound to be even more intense. But humanity had something they didn't: the element of surprise. The Vigilant and its fleet were now deployed across multiple fronts, striking Zorkian positions at unexpected moments, making it clear that the humans would not stop until they had avenged their allies and shown the galaxy the true extent of their power. Humanity wasn't just a force for peace anymore, they were a force to be reckoned with. And if anyone doubted that before, they wouldn't be able to deny it much longer. The message had been sent: harm our allies, and we will make you regret it. But as humanity's power continued to grow, a deeper question lingered in the minds of the galaxy's leaders. Could the Zorkians survive the wrath of a species so relentless, so precise, and so determined? The answers and the consequences were still unfolding, and the universe was watching, waiting to see how far humanity would go. In the shadows, another power was beginning to stir. The Zorkians, now humiliated and desperate, would stop at nothing to exact revenge. But humanity had a new strength, one forged not in hatred, but in the determination to protect those they loved. The consequences had only just begun. The galaxy was on edge. After the shockwaves of humanity's first strike, the Zorkians had retreated, licking their wounds, but their anger burned hot. They weren't ready to give up, not by a long shot. Their response was swift, brutal, and full of fury. Humanity, however, was far from backing down. General Stryker had made it clear that this was not just a battle for the N-Core, or any one race, it was a fight for the future of peace itself. And humanity's response was one that would not just echo through the stars, but change the very balance of power in the galaxy. The Coalition of Unity had never seen anything like it. The human fleet, having gained critical intelligence from their earlier raids, and with the N-Core now fully on board as an ally, launched a series of calculated strikes. Each one was executed with military precision, targeting strategic locations within Zorkian space. But this wasn't just about military superiority, it was a message. Humanity wasn't just defending its own. They were defending the ideals of peace and cooperation that the Coalition had built, and they would fight to protect those who had been wronged. General Stryker, now more than ever, was the face of humanity's response. Standing before a war room filled with officers from both the human and N-Core ranks, she issued the orders. The stakes were high. They had to strike fast, hit where it would hurt the most, and leave the Zorkians no time to regroup. Their target was a major Zorkian shipyard, one of the last remaining hubs for building their formidable warships. Without it, the Zorkian military would be severely crippled. The plan was set. The human fleet would deploy under the cover of an unexpected solar storm, using the natural chaos of the storm to conceal their approach. As the fleet set its course, there was an unsettling silence that filled the corridors of the ship. Every officer knew what was at stake, but there was no room for fear. The crew had trained for this moment. They had seen firsthand what the Zorkians were capable of, and they knew they had to finish what had started. The Vigilant, flagship of the human fleet, was the spearhead of the mission. On board, General Stryker paced calmly, her eyes focused on the swirling chaos outside the viewport. The storm was their shield, but it wouldn't last forever. They had only one chance. The strike was launched without warning. Zorkian defenses, unprepared for such a bold move, were shattered in a matter of minutes. The human ships, using cutting-edge technology that combined human ingenuity with Encore intelligence, struck like a swarm of hornets. Laser beams flashed through the storm as enemy ships were torn apart by a force they couldn't understand. The Zorkian shipyard, a once proud symbol of their military power, was reduced to nothing more than debris in space. The victory was swift, but it sent a clear message across the galaxy. Humanity was not afraid to act. The Zorkians had only just begun to feel the weight of their mistakes. In the wake of the attack, the Zorkian command responded with rage. Their military might, though now weaker, was still formidable. In retaliation, they began to move toward human colonies, launching sporadic strikes along the outer rim. It was a desperate attempt to reassert dominance, but it was futile. Humanity had prepared for this. The response was already in motion. The second wave came within days. But this time, humanity was ready. They didn't just defend their colonies, they attacked with a force so overwhelming that the Zorkians found themselves reeling. A massive counteroffensive was launched, this time targeting Zorkian supply lines and reinforcements. The fleet, now bolstered by allies from other coalition races, moved with deadly purpose. Each strike was more calculated than the last. The Zorkians were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. And the galaxy was beginning to take notice. Humanity's new alliance with the Encore had proven invaluable. The Encore, with their advanced technology and superior knowledge of their own lost world, had provided humanity with tools and strategies that no one could have anticipated. They had a way of blending their technologies, using their peaceful ideals to create weapons and defense systems that were more efficient and precise than anything the Zorkians had ever seen. The results were immediate. Zorkian warships, once considered nearly invincible, were being destroyed with alarming regularity. Their fleets, once overwhelming in number, were now scattered and disorganized. The Zorkians, however, were not so easily defeated. In their desperation, they turned to a forbidden weapon, a last-ditch effort that would bring the galaxy to its knees. It was a weapon so powerful, so deadly, that even the thought of it had been outlawed in the oldest of galactic treaties. But the Zorkians had crossed every line, and now they were willing to use anything they could to regain control. They unleashed a devastating biological weapon, capable of wiping out entire populations in a matter of days. The weapon was released on a small, unprotected human colony, a place they believed would be easy to destroy without facing the full force of the human fleet. The Zorkians had made a grave mistake. When the news of the biological attack reached General Stryker, a chilling silence fell over the room. The biological weapon, though horrific, was not something that could destroy humanity's will. It was, however, a call to arms, one that no human could ignore. This was not just about protecting their allies anymore. It was about ensuring that no enemy could ever threaten them or their loved ones again. The human response was immediate and decisive. The biological attack was met with a counterattack that would leave the Zorkians shattered, their leadership scattered and on the run. Humanity was no longer playing defense. They had become the galaxy's most formidable force, fierce, relentless, and willing to protect their allies at all costs. The message was clearer than ever: harm our allies, and you will face the consequences. The Zorkians had provoked the wrong species, and now the galaxy was witnessing humanity's full power for the first time. The question was no longer if humanity would win, but how long the Zorkians could survive before they were crushed beneath the weight of the galaxy's most relentless defenders. The Zorkian military was reeling. Their fleets had been shattered, their colonies attacked, and their leadership left scrambling. Yet despite the overwhelming pressure, they had not yet surrendered. Instead, they did something unexpected. They reached out for help. It was a desperate move, but one born out of sheer survival. The Zorkians knew they couldn't win this war alone. And in the far reaches of the galaxy, they knew of one faction who might just give them a fighting chance: the Traka. A race as brutal and war-hardened as the Zorkians, the Traka had long been a mysterious force, their empire hidden behind the darkest corners of space. For years, they had stayed out of galactic politics, quietly building their own strength, biding their time. The Track K were rumored to be unmatched in hand-to-hand combat, their soldiers ruthless and highly skilled. Their weapons were feared across the galaxy, and their history of conquest had earned them the respect of those who valued power above all else. The Zorkians knew that, with the Traka by their side, they could turn the tide. But they were also aware of the risk. The Track Ka didn't fight for loyalty or friendship. They fought for one thing: power. The Zorkians would need to offer them something far more than promises if they were to secure their aid. So, a message was sent, a call for an alliance in the hopes of salvaging their war effort. The response was swift, and much to the Zorkian surprise, it was favorable. The Track K were not known for kindness, but they saw the opportunity in the Zorkians' desperation. They agreed to the alliance, with one condition: humanity had to be defeated, and the coalition of unity had to be broken. It wasn't a simple request, it was a statement. The Track K didn't care for the grand ideals of peace. They wanted to see the galaxy bend to their will. And for that, the Zorkians had to show them a victory. Humanity, meanwhile, was on high alert. General Stryker had long known that the Zorkians would not accept defeat so easily, and she feared that a new player had entered the game. The news of the Track K joining forces with the Zorkians was a bitter pill to swallow. The Track K had never been an easy enemy to face, and their alliance with the Zorkians meant that the stakes were now higher than ever before. But for General Stryker, there was no time to waste in dwelling on the new threat. The coalition had been stretched thin, and now, with the Traxka entering the fray, humanity needed to find new allies, ones who could counter the brutal force that was coming their way. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, another race was watching the situation unfold. The Y-Ra, a race of technologically advanced beings, had long kept to themselves. They were neutral, some might say even indifferent to the struggles of the galaxy. However, the Y-Ra had a unique relationship with humanity. Years ago, humanity had helped the Y-Ray avert a catastrophe, saving their homeworld from an environmental collapse that could have wiped them out. Since then, the Y-Ra had always kept an eye on humanity, quietly respecting them from afar. But the news of the Track K joining forces with the Zorkians was enough to make the Y-Ray reconsider their position. If humanity could face this new threat, then they had to be allies worth having. A meeting was arranged, a secret one, far from the prying eyes of the Galactic Council. General Stryker, her mind as sharp as ever, sat across from the Y-Ra delegation. The room was tense with unspoken words, but there was an understanding between them. The Y-Ray had the resources and the advanced technology that humanity desperately needed, and in return, humanity could offer them the one thing the Y-Ray valued most: a guarantee that the coalition would hold. For the Y-Ra, it wasn't just about survival, it was about maintaining their status in the galaxy. And as they looked at the humans, they saw not just a species fighting for survival, but a force of determination, one that could change the balance of power. The negotiations were long, filled with tension and uncertainty. The Y-Ra were cautious, reluctant to join any conflict. But General Stryker's persistence, coupled with the clear threat posed by the Traka and the Zorkians, eventually swayed them. Humanity's message was simple: join us or face a galaxy where strength alone determines the future. The Y-Ra saw the truth in those words. There would be no neutral ground in this war. The stakes were too high. And so, after days of intense discussions, they agreed to lend their support to the humans. The reluctant alliance was born. The news of this new alliance was met with mixed reactions throughout the galaxy. Some were hopeful, seeing the strength of the Y-Ra as a significant boost to humanity's cause. Others, however, saw it as a dangerous escalation. The Track Ka, now bolstered by their alliance with the Zorkians, would surely retaliate with overwhelming force. Humanity was no longer fighting a single enemy, they were now facing a coalition of some of the most dangerous factions the galaxy had ever known. The odds were stacked against them, but one thing was clear: humanity wasn't backing down. As the Zorkians and Traka began to mobilize their forces, the newly formed alliance between humanity and the Y began to take shape. But there was an underlying tension. The Y-Ra had agreed to fight, but only if their terms were met. They wanted control over certain strategic systems once the war was over. Humanity, in turn, Agreed, but with the understanding that the future of the galaxy would be decided together, not by the Waira alone. The uneasy alliance was born from necessity, but its foundation was far from stable. As the forces prepared for the battles ahead, each side knew that trust would need to be built over time. The war had reached a new chapter, and no one could predict how the reluctant allies would fare against the combined might of the Zorkians and the Traka. But one thing was certain, the galaxy was no longer the same. The stakes were higher, the risks greater, and the outcome uncertain. As the first shots were fired, it became clear that the war for the future of the galaxy had only just begun. The galaxy had never seen a war like this. The mighty forces of the Zorkians and the brutal warriors of the Traka had clashed with the combined might of humanity and the Waira, each side locked in a battle for dominance that stretched across star systems. As the war raged on, the once proud Zorkians found themselves on the defensive, their military shattered by the unrelenting strikes from the humans and their allies. The Traka, though fierce, were not immune to the technological might of the humans, and the Waira's advanced weaponry had begun to turn the tide in favor of the coalition. However, as the war seemed to shift in favor of humanity, there was an unsettling realization among the galactic leaders. The Zorkians and Traka were not going to give up easily. The end of this war was not in sight, and the stakes had never been higher. General Stryker sat in the command center of the Vigilant, her eyes fixed on the holographic map before her. The Zorkians were pushing back, using the last of their strength to regroup and rearm, but she knew they had one last card to play. She had felt it in the pit of her stomach for days, and uneasy silence had fallen over their enemies. It was the calm before the storm. The Zorkians, in their desperation, had turned to their last, most dangerous resource. With the Traka's war strategy and the Zorkians' biological warfare expertise combined, they had begun to prepare a weapon that could wipe out entire planets. It wasn't just a weapon of destruction, it was a weapon of extinction, capable of erasing entire species from existence. If it worked, humanity and its allies could be wiped out in a matter of days. Word of the weapon's development reached the humans and the Waira. Both races were deeply concerned, knowing that this weapon could be the game-changer, the one thing that could turn the tide of war once and for all. A council was called, and the leaders of humanity, the Waira, and the Encore met in secret. The message was clear: they had to act before the Zorkians could unleash their weapon. If they didn't, there might be no galaxy left to fight for. The decision was made. The Vigilant would lead a strike force, deep into Zorkian territory, to find and destroy the weapon before it could be activated. General Stryker knew this mission would be their most dangerous yet. Time was running out. The weapon was almost ready, and once it was unleashed, there would be no turning back. The fleet moved in silence as they approached the heart of Zorkian space. The Zorkians had set up heavy defenses around their weapon, knowing that humanity would never stop until it was destroyed. But General Stryker had a plan. They would infiltrate the Zorkian stronghold using stealth technology developed by the Waira. The element of surprise would be their greatest weapon. As the Vigilant and its fleet moved closer, the tension was palpable. The men and women aboard each ship were ready for the battle of their lives. But as they neared the Zorkian stronghold, something unexpected happened. The Zorkians, anticipating an attack, activated their weapon early. A massive, pulsating energy field suddenly expanded across the sector, engulfing the entire fleet in its radius. The weapon wasn't just designed to destroy, it was designed to erase. It began to consume everything in its path, starting with the nearby stars. The destruction was unimaginable. It was as though the very fabric of space itself was being torn apart. General Stryker stared at the screen, her heart racing. "All ships, retreat," she ordered, but it was too late. The Vigilant and several other ships were already caught in the expanding field. The pull was immense, but the humans were fighters. Using every last ounce of strength and resourcefulness, they managed to push forward, out of the immediate destruction zone. But it was clear time was running out. It was then that a voice crackled through the comms, a voice that made Stryker's blood run cold. "This is the Zorkian High Command," the voice said, dripping with disdain. "You thought you could stop us. You thought we would submit. Now you will learn the true cost of defying us." This is your final warning. Turn back, or face the full consequences of our wrath. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Zorkians had made it clear. This was no longer just a fight for territory or revenge. This was a fight for survival, humanity's survival. The galaxy was teetering on the brink of destruction, and the only way to stop the Zorkians was to destroy the weapon and prevent them from gaining any further power. As the Zorkian fleet closed in on them, General Stryker made the only choice she could. "Prepare the counterattack," she ordered. "We're not backing down now." She knew that this was humanity's last chance. They had come too far to turn back. It was time to show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of. The final battle would be one of sacrifice, courage, and determination. It was no longer about proving strength. It was about sending a message to the galaxy and to the Zorkians that humanity would not be erased. This was the final warning. Harm our allies, and we will fight to the bitter end. As the fleet charged forward into the heart of Zorkian territory, the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. And General Stryker knew that the next few hours would determine not only the outcome of the war, but the very future of all life in the galaxy. It was now or never, and humanity was ready to make its stand.